I'm going to say steroids don't build muscle. Had met some great people, obviously Flex Wheeler. And I just felt like I had a lot more knowledge as well.
And then when you came back, you were 38, right? When you came back, if I remember correctly?
Yeah, 30. That's right. 38. I started competing again. I had taken 10 years off of competing. I made a lot of mistakes early in my career. And I always say, if I knew then what I know now, I might have been able to do more younger. My window of opportunity was damn near closed by the time I restarted, but I was fortunate to achieve a lot in a very short period of time and grateful for that.
This episode is brought to you by First Detachment. First Detachment is an expert formulated supplement company founded by renowned coach Justin Harris. We've combined science with real-world experience in each product. We are battle tested. Are you? Find your battle today at firstdetachment.com. All right, hey YouTube, welcome to the First Detachment channel. We got a big guest, really excited to have on here, Stan Efferding, someone Justin and I have been following for quite some time now, and as always, my co-host, Mr. Justin Harris. So, Stan, thanks so much for joining us. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thanks for having me, brother. I ran in, I had my little alarm set. I was out doing yard work. I made the mistake of buying a fixer-upper here in Las Vegas.
Okay.
And so now I'm a full-time jack of all trades, master of none. It's the DIY king here. So I was out in the yard doing yard work today, of all things. I haven't done yard work in 15 years. I've been living here in Vegas, and all the homes are rock and turf. And so I had to actually go buy a lawnmower for the first time in a couple decades. And so I've got my Dickies on today. I'm representing.
There you go.
Dickies, my painting coveralls. So I'm out there getting my hands dirty again.
Nice.
Putting it to work. Well, I'm sure it's all the training and the vertical diet and all the things you're doing is probably helping still fuel you right now, still getting after it out there.
It's funny. I don't know how long ago it was. It might be 15 years or more when Evan Centopani bought a fixer-upper house, I think out in Boston, and was showing some of the work that he was doing. And I was thinking, what an idiot. Because I used to do that. I used to do construction, and I ran owned multifamily properties. And I know what a nightmare it is of just constant work. But we came across this really beautiful property here in Vegas, and dove in, and now I'm kind of back to I've gone full circle.
Yeah.
Where are you in Vegas? Like Henderson or north?
Las Vegas, just east of the airport, a stone's throw by Sunset Park there on Eastern and Sunset.
Oh, cool. Okay, cool.
Yeah, because you're originally from Oregon, right? That's where you
Agreed.
Went to
Yeah. Born and raised in Oregon, went to University of Oregon. Then I moved to Seattle for some 20 years. I'm 55 now, so I've been around a bit.
Yeah, no, I was just kind of looking through the progression of your career just over the years of following you, and it was really interesting to see. You were the early competition years in powerlifting and competing, and then when you came back, you were 38, right? When you came back, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, 30. That's right. 38. I started competing again. I had taken 10 years off of competing from 1997 to 2006. Just working.
Did you stay in shape?
I did. I'd certainly lost some size. I wasn't eating as much or training as often, but I just, in 2006, I kind of got bit by the bug again. I guess I could say that I became successful. So I had the time and the resources to reinvest, and tried to pick up where I left off. And fortunately, I was, again, having the time and the resources is huge. But I also, had met some great people, obviously Flex Wheeler. Yeah. I just felt like I had a lot more knowledge as well. I made a lot of mistakes early in my career, and I always say, if I knew then what I know now, I might have been able to do more younger. My window of opportunity was damn near closed by the time I restarted, but I was fortunate to achieve a lot in a very short period of time, and I'm grateful for that.
Well, you like when you came back, I don't know why it was such a big thing, and it might be just because, like I said, I'm a fan of the strength sports also, but it seemed like when you came back to bodybuilding, it was huge news, because that was kind of, I won the junior USAs in 2006, and then I did the USAs in 2007, and then I just kind of bowed out. And so I was right in the thick of, full on obsessed, want to be a pro bodybuilder. And it was so, like, the timing worked out for me to be a huge fan, but it seemed like you were everywhere all of a sudden in the bodybuilding world.
Yeah, and I got to give a lot of credit to both Flex Wheeler and his relationship with Muscular Development and Flex Magazine. that I had the, I was fortunate to be featured in those. And the hybrid, people like the bodybuilder strength stuff.
Yeah.
We've liked it since Arnold and those guys used to do it, and Lou Ferrigno, and who was it that Arnold's good buddy there that used to do deadlifting? It was a savage deadlifter. Yeah. Franco Colombo. So, we always like to see that. And of course, Ronnie Coleman, a savage powerlifter, bodybuilder. We like to see the big, even though lifting those big weights does nothing for bodybuilding. We like to see it. We wear it as a badge of honor if we're stronger than the other people, even though it has no bearing on your physique on stage.
Yeah. I always felt like it was kind of because, I think a lot of people get into bodybuilding, because they want to carry more muscle. Maybe they were smaller, whatever, some type of insecurity. But and then you kind of realize that the muscle is more or less useless as far as like power or strength, and so I think part of it is like almost like self-proving, like, look, I'm not just for show. I can actually do something too. I think, or at least I think that was probably it for me.
Agreed. And I used to, of course, when I started out, I started competing back in 1988. I thought the stronger you got, the bigger you would get. That was everything I focused on. And it took me a long time to figure out that wasn't the case. And when I started training with Flex Wheeler, he wouldn't even let me do a squat, bench, or deadlift. Not a single one for I think it was north of 8 months. I had obviously a really strong lumbar and glutes, but I had very weak quads. And so he put me on movements that would isolate the quads more. And same thing with benching for chest. For some people, it's not the best exercise for chest. Different people respond differently to a bench press. Some people are shoulder dominant, some people are tricep dominant, some people are chest dominant. And I had huge shoulders as a result of benching. Loved the incline press, but not a very good chest. And so Flex would have me do more dumbbells, range of motion. Flex is not recognized as being the most, how do we say this kindly, the academically accredited bodybuilder in the world. But I'll tell you what, just his they say book smarts and street smarts. The information that he gave me, I liked that people like Alan Aragon and Brad Schoenfeld, the people I look to now for, obviously for scientific information, they say, the bros were right. And I learned more from Flex in that short period of time that really, really helped me in the way that he trained me during that time.
Well, he helped a lot of breakthrough careers. I mean, Phil Heath, when Phil Heath won the Junior Nationals in 2005,
Ronnie Coleman
kind of came over. Ronnie Coleman, perfect example. Yeah, so I mean, he really did have some impact, and unfortunately, and some people who kind of derailed with Ronnie derailed his chance of being Mr. Olympia, by basically training your successor. But it's funny you mentioned Flex Wheeler, because I came from the same thing where I thought stronger. I lifted for football and I just wanted to be big and strong. I thought stronger meant bigger. And I remember the 2000 Battle for the Olympia. Chris Cormier was training with Flex Wheeler with Charles Glass, and Materials filming at Gold's, and Flex Wheeler's doing T-bar rows with 325s, and it just blew my mind. And I rewound it, because VHS, and I'm like, that, trying to because I always try to think through things logically, like, how is this working? And then that was like the click that it's not just how much weight you're moving, there's more to the equation. And that really was like when my bodybuilding kind of career started, when I realized that it was more than just how much can I put on a squat bar and move it through space.
That's right. Yeah. And we're seeing now, of course, all the research supports that. I think somebody that's really good at that is Mike Israetel, talking about the importance of the range of motion, maybe leaving a rep or two in the tank. Whereas, we might take every set to failure. And the fatigue that you would accumulate was it was overwhelming. I was probably a lot more sore than I needed to be. And I hate to say, and I wasn't as successful as I could have been. I wasn't as strong or as big. I was a decent powerlifter back in the early 90s.
You did pretty well.
But I didn't make huge strides, and I didn't set records in powerlifting until I came back and was kind of hybriding hypertrophy or going back and forth between hypertrophy and bodybuilding or in powerlifting. And, obviously Mark Bell's help and some of the West Side principles were very helpful.
Yeah, I was going to ask you a little bit about that too, because I noticed your dad he's 92.
92, lives with me. That's
awesome. So because I was really curious, because I'm my early 40s and training and things, but I noticed like it looked like you made a pretty big jump there, and I'm just curious to how much you felt like, was it the training style, or what are some things you did that you feel like helped you stay strong? I not the same level as you in my early 20s, but I competed in my 20s in powerlifting and bodybuilding, and then went the corporate route for a while, and then I don't have any aspirations of chasing a pro thing, but definitely I think there's a lot of guys and girls like me in our age groups that want to get after it again, and just interested to hear your perspective on how you're able to do that, what you felt like was a big difference for you.
Boy, I wish I could pinpoint one thing, and I'm hesitant to do so, because we see too much of that now. The influencers talking about these mechanisms of action and making these giant logical leaps into outcomes, and they just aren't there. When I sat down with Flex Wheeler in 2008, and I was just like the audience now. You asked a very great question. They're like, okay, here we go. Here's the one big thing. It isn't any one big thing. When I sat down with Flex Wheeler, I was waiting for the Wizard of Oz to pull back the curtain and show me the secret. I'd spent untold fortunes and time and travel looking under every rock, trying to find something that was significant, that would take me to the next level. How many times have you heard that over the years?
Yeah,
right.
And everything, if I go from 2 IUs to 20 IUs of GH, I'm gonna make a real, impact on the sport. None of that is true. And if I thought something was significant, I would say it.
Yeah.
And I sat down there with Flex with a yellow pad of paper, and I was so eager, and he talked for an hour and a half. This was at Firehouse Restaurant in Venice. I still remember sitting there listening to him. And at the end of the conversation, I didn't have anything written on my paper. He didn't tell me anything I didn't already know. And I do all these podcasts, and I see comments from people. Stan just keeps repeating himself. He says the same thing. And that's because that's the shit that works. Yeah. And I'm not interested in making stuff up,
right,
or over exaggerating the meaningfulness of some, some nominal little supplement or, training protocol, or everything works. Nothing works forever. The reason I wrote the Vertical Diet book is because it's very comprehensive. It includes all the things that I think you need to do concurrently, the whole being greater than the sum of its parts. And that's why I go down the whole sleep, hydration, nutrition, blood testing, obviously the training portion, and supplements. I cover everything in there. Certainly the performance enhancing drug protocols, make a significant difference. But I always enjoyed this, kind of as an aside, hearing somebody who wanted to, or was going to compete against me, saying things like, as soon as I get my finances together, because that told me that they had nothing else, in their quiver, no other arrows. And I already knew that they weren't living the bodybuilding lifestyle. They weren't eating consistently enough good quality foods. They weren't training nearly hard enough, consistently enough, sleeping. These were people who would go out and party on the weekends and, eat fast food and, train to show off. See how many plates they could put on the leg press, but not do a full rep. I wish I could pinpoint something in particular, but what I said is I had the time and I had the resources.
Yeah.
I was able to move to San Jose and live in an extended stay, or it was a place with a kitchen, just across the street from the gym, and train twice a day with Flex Wheeler, eat 6-7 times a day, nap every afternoon, sleep 9 hours a night. I was eating 3+ pounds of top sirloin steak, and I think that made a difference in my physique, certainly, but I can't say it was any one thing. And then, obviously hiring someone like Flex to work with me twice a day. I did a video where I talked about why I'm a hypocrite. It's a YouTube video where I go into the financial cost of all of that I just mentioned. You can imagine just staying in a 2-bedroom place with a kitchen, because I was there with Keith Williams at the time. Another IFBB pro, Nike track sponsored athlete. So, I also did another video called "The Real Reason Why Westside Barbell Athletes Are So Strong," and it speaks a lot about just training in general. Surrounding myself with people like Flex and Keith that pushed me so hard every single day. It was an unbelievable commitment. I think just recently I saw Brian Carroll say the most important thing you can do for or something that somebody can have for, becoming strong is your team.
Mm.
And I mentioned that in that video about Westside Barbell Athletes. When you're training with great people under great coaches, and and everybody's committed and they're pushing each other, and you're competing against each other, like I was at Mark Bell's place. He threw me in with the best benchers, the best squatters, the best deadlifters, and we just went at it. Just every single workout was just brutal, and so obviously that whole thing, it was tens of thousands of dollars over a 3-month period. It was damn near, $2,000 a month just in food. So I was fortunate not to have any distractions or any stress.
Yeah.
I didn't have any kids. I didn't have, to worry about work or money or all of that. And so I was fully, and then as soon as I got my pro card with Flex, I drove from San Jose to Sacramento, and I lived there for over 2 months and trained with Mark Bell under the same circumstances, and I was very diligent about, every meal, every workout, every hour of sleep. I had to incorporate some better recovery techniques, because at least initially, with all that heavy lifting and not as much volume, I was having a significant amount of DOMs. And so that's when I kind of threw in those, I call them 10-minute walks, but at the time I got a recumbent bike and put it in my room, and I was doing 3 or 4 10-minute spins throughout the day, and it dramatically helped my recovery, just blood flow in general. So I wish I could, pinpoint what was most important, but I think it's all of those things. And when I did that seminar in Iceland with Hafthor Bjornsson some years ago, I said, sleep, eat, train. So that's what we're going to talk about today, and optimizing those. I've kind of moved past, as has the nutrition community, the PhDs in nutrition now, moved past focusing on individual foods and looking more at dietary patterns, and then quickly going from information to execution. I say compliance is the science. And so a lot of what I did is I was extremely disciplined, had good time management. I was very consistent. Everything was just dialed down to where it was just so routine every single day. And if something was working, I would double down on it. And if I didn't think I was getting a result from something and it was a distraction, then I would, discard that. And I learned a lot of things from a lot of coaches. And I didn't necessarily agree with everything they said, but I took what worked for me, and I incorporated it into my training and nutrition, etc. And boy, I'm sorry, I don't have anything that's remarkable in that regard.
No,
well, I think
that's perfect.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
Well, because what I've frustratingly been envious of you about is how you've taken those things, because I've always said pick it, kill it, grow it for the diet. Or we have a shirt that we sell: steak, rice, repeat, chicken, rice, repeat. And so I've for 20 years I've preached all these things, and then you came in and with just the perfect wording, the vertical diet, the 10-minute walks. And so I've always been jealous of how well you nailed it, because that is what it is. It's boring. It's meat, rice, move, and I tend to train with progressive overloads, because it's some trackable metric in the gym, and make progress in the gym, and then just repeat for a decade. It's boring.
Let me say that I have a video, and I think it's on YouTube again. I talk about, I don't know, I can't remember if it's titled something about life changing, or if it's just 10 great ideas that we don't make money on, or something like that. I will talk about things that are life changing for me. And I don't use that word flippantly, because, I've been at this for 30 years. And I think a lot of people, again, they exaggerate or overemphasize the meaningfulness of their latest supplement they're selling. There are a few things. First and foremost was probably the CPAP. Back in 1993, the first time I got north of 230, 240, and I was having sleep apnea. And I'd wake up and I'd almost fall asleep driving to work in the morning. Getting a CPAP was life-changing for me. And that's what all my clients say: Hafthor Bjornsson, Brian Shaw, Dan Green, Lane Johnson from the Eagles, none of whom were wearing a CPAP. When they implemented that, they had so much more energy and recovered better. So the CPAP is life-changing for me. I love talking on consults with clients. I love talking about things like the thermos. That little $20 thermos on Amazon was life-changing for me, particularly as someone who traveled quite a bit. I've done, over 200 seminars in 14 countries in all 50 states. And the bodybuilding figure physique bikini world, they've carried around Tupperwares in their 6-pack bags for decades. And it's one of the most meaningful, compliance tricks or tools that you can use is to meal prep. But I hated the Tupperware thing. I was running around airports trying to find a microwave because I had to eat food. So when I found out you could put really hot food in a thermos and it would stay hot for 10 hours, I was set. I'd carry those on airplanes. And of course, then I take meal prep with me when I travel. I went to Hawaii earlier or last year, and I did the same thing when I went to Australia. Same thing when I went to Switzerland. Same thing when I go to anywhere for more than a couple of days. I'll take a rolling Coleman cooler and fill it with 30 frozen meals. My meals that with my macros that I digest well, and I'll check them on the plane with my checked bag, and just stay at a place with a microwave and a fridge, and I'm just eating my food all week long. It's nothing I have to stress about, missing meals. So that was life-changing for me. Something as simple as a $20 thermos, and I don't make any money saying that. I don't sell thermos. Another one more recently, I got to tell you, is that Ninja grill. Good God, that thing's amazing. Those two little drawers, the gray one they sell at Costco.
Yeah, I just started seeing those.
You just flop your food in there and set it for whatever, 14, 16, 18 minutes and walk away. And it's unbelievable. I was cooking steaks, a variety of different ways. It's kind of time consuming and you have to be there paying attention to the food. And I don't like reheating my food very much. The Monster Mash reheats well, just because it's, ground beef or ground bison and rice and bone broth. So at least it's moist and it's not all dry. But, oh my God, salmon in the, I put it on a little piece of parchment paper or whatever that is, wax paper, or I don't know what that is, but in that grill, and it is ridiculous. Tastes amazing. And you don't even have to manage it. You just put it in, turn it on, you walk away, do whatever you're doing. Things like that, time-saving techniques.
Any particular one you use? The air one, the indoor? We got all kinds of options here.
Yeah, it's Ninja grill. Costco sells it. It's the big gray one with two drawers. I didn't see it in that display there, but that might be hard to see. Yeah, there's one with two drawers open there about midway down. This thing's amazing. So that's exciting to me. Obviously, the Monster Mash was a big deal because I could, for somebody who wanted to gain weight, this is one of the best meals that Lane Johnson and Hawthorne and the rest of them all really enjoyed too, was the fact that they could eat a lot of food relatively easily because the bone broth everything was moist. I got to tell you, I got the tip or the idea from the way that sumo wrestlers eat those big soups.
Oh yeah. Well, they do like big faux meals or whatever.
Yeah, big faux meals full of rice and chicken and broth. And it's just easier to consume massive amounts of food without feeling, overwhelmed by that task. Yeah, people don't appreciate how hard it is to eat.
That's super interesting because I've known that for years that's what I vividly remember reading a Sports Illustrated article about, and I never kind of put two and two together. I mean, I do like the Monster Mash myself, so I understand like the moisture of it, and I tend to cook my rice and broth pretty often.
So do I,
for the flavor. But yeah, that's funny. I never would have paired the two. See, that's what. And the other thing that I really love here is that the other thing I always say, and because we'll get tore up in the comments, and I just posted some videos to TikTok where you doubly get tore up, where I talk about like getting huge is a two-step process. Teach the body to eat more and more good, clean food. Steak and rice, and then get really strong in a bodybuilding rep range with a bodybuilding workout in the gym, and then let time pass. And so of course all the comments are, you forgot gear, you forgot PEDs, you forgot trend, yada. And I always try to tell people, when you get, permabulker meatheads, 23-year-old kids in a circle talking about how to gain muscle, that's what they all talk about. When you sit around with pro bodybuilders, it's all food. And everything you've talked about so far has been the food, the thermos, the Monster Mash, the Ninja grill. And that, because that's what the sport is how am I going to bring 6 pre-planned meals with me every single day, get them all in? How am I going to eat steak and rice every 3 hours for the next 15 years, every single day?
Hey, you want to get a whole bunch of comments in this post? I'll tell you, I'm going to say steroids don't build muscle. All steroids do is increase nitrogen retention. Yeah. Right. And they allow you to recover faster so you can train more. but they don't actually build the muscle. You need to have the food and the training. The training's the stimulus, and the food is what's used to construct and build muscle. You need calories, obviously, and protein. Steroids also gives you kind of a lower minimum effective volume and a greater maximum recoverable volume. So you can be a little fast and loose and still get results. They certainly work, but it's not because they're responsible. Taking, more of them isn't going to build more muscle, but eating more food and training, optimizing your hypertrophy training is certainly the way to do it. And then the steroids just help facilitate that. So you can.
Well, that's key. Yeah, I mean, they can't synthesize muscle tissue from air.
Nope.
Your muscle tissue is protein structures. Your body is made up of food. So you could take all the gear in the world. If you don't supply it with food and training, yes, the gear is going to make sure that any food you do eat is more likely to be synthesized as new muscle proteins. But you still have to eat it, and you still have to create the stimulus in the gym. And that's what's so frustrating. And as an 18 to 26-year-old, I probably wouldn't have gotten it either. And I probably would have thought, especially because, like you said, like at the start, I think we might even been off air, because it's a whole process of going through the PED world. You start out with your, a baby cycle, and you build up, and each time you don't look like Ronnie Coleman. So you think, well, the reason I don't look like Ronnie Coleman is because I haven't tried this compound, or the reason because I haven't tried.
I'm not taking as much as he took.
Yeah, exactly. But eventually you get to the end of that road, and you still don't look like Ronnie Coleman, and you got to do some self-reflection and think, okay, there must be another variable. Let me look back at the unbelievable. What do I see Ronnie doing? Eating good old chicken. Eating bread.
Right. Ronnie ate a ton of food. Same with Kai Green. I mean, these guys had enormous appetites.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
very important. And one of the hardest components of that, not just for bodybuilders, but for athletes, for strongmen and pro football players, etc. So kind of back to food. Another one was just the rice with a little bit of dextrose on it was a huge changer for me. The difference between a 4,000 calorie diet and a 5,000 calorie diet is 3 cups of rice. Yeah. Nothing else changes. You don't change your protein intake. You certainly, not going to want to increase your fats, beyond I'd say probably maybe 30% of your total calories. Otherwise, you're just going to gain too much fat. But carbs, if you're doing hypertrophy training, are the best fuel and can be stored as glycogen. And so that was kind of easy. They're easier to consume. The white rice is a big deal. And then you sprinkle a little dextrose on it. Sushi rice is sugar rice. Yeah. And you can eat a ton of it and you're hungry an hour later.
Yep. Yeah.
Another little trick was just that 3 ounces of orange juice. I talked about that many years ago. And I noticed that my ALT came down. And we see that in peer-reviewed published research as well, that orange juice can bring down uric acid. It can bring down ALT. It can actually lower LDL cholesterol, decrease C-reactive protein. Mm-hmm. We're seeing a lot of people talk about that now, the benefits of fruits or fruit juices. And so, that helped me. I would just have, I think I did a video called 14 Tips to Improve Your Appetite, where I talked about that on YouTube. And just sipping on 3 ounces of orange juice. I'm not talking about sucking down a gallon of sugar water every day. There's been some powerlifters or strongmen who have done that and added a ton of weight by adding insulin and sugar, but they end up with kidney problems. And that's and you and I both know who we're talking about. Those are dangerous things to try and do, is just force down a ton of sugar. But in terms of increasing your appetite, again, an hour later after I ate, I was ravenously hungry again, and I was able to consume more food. When I started working with Brian Shaw, I had him implement all of these little, just these little dietary tips. And a week later, he called me up. He said, "Stan, I'm hungry." I haven't been hungry in years. Because I saw Brian prior to when I worked with him. He was at a movie set here in Vegas, and he would have pizzas delivered all damn day. There'd be big, large pizza, and he would have to sit down and consume all of it because he needed 8,000 plus calories a day just to sustain that 400 plus pound body of his and his training workload. And, at that point, calorie is a calorie. If you don't eat it, you're losing size and strength. Mm-hmm. But there's a way that you can change the types of foods that you eat just to make it a little easier on you. And so you don't have all the indigestion and diarrhea. These are problems that a lot of my big athletes suffer from, just constantly on the toilet and bloating and just feeling miserable all the time with brain fog. And then when they use the recommendations that I make, out of trial and error, it's just my own personal experience. I've been up over 300 pounds many times throughout my career. And, sometimes it's easier than others based on how you feed that.
Yeah, I was going to say, Oh, go ahead, Justin.
Well, it's just I hope some of my clients are listening because it's awesome to hear this because the same thing I do carb cycling diets, but it's very similar to vertical diet, and it's basically meat and rice repeated. But then on our really high carb days, I implement sugar. About up to 50% of the carbs for me in each meal can come from sugary sources, and I prefer fruit and fruit juice and things like that. And every single time without fail, you have a client, because I'm kind of known as someone that adds size on people, and with so you get people who can't add size, and I send them the diet, and they see this high day with all these carbs, and they insist they won't be able to eat it, and I have to say, no, you hired me, let's work through this, we'll just follow the diet week one, we'll change what we need to change. And without fail, it's like you just said, the high, they come back and they said, I don't it doesn't make any sense to me, but I'm actually the most hungry on that high day when I eat the most carbs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Well, I was going to mention earlier, just kind of going back to what you're saying at the opening, is like, I think that's one thing, Justin and I both have appreciated about you is just, we both came from more of a formal education as well as kind of the street smarts. So we I really enjoy, I read the Vertical Diet back around when it came out. And so really appreciated that, there's backing of science and, like you said, not just make believe stuff that, the silver bullet, if you will. And so I think all that kind of coming together is really helpful. You mentioned when you were talking, like you didn't say one thing, but you said so many things I think that are going to help a lot of people as far as, even the level you were competing at, you were still seeking out, coaches or people to help you grow along those lines, as well as the preparation with food and those things. So I think all those things are really interesting. And then the last point I wanted to mention about, Justin, like you have a lot of bodybuilders between 320 and 260, kind of those large frames for IFBB pros and top level national guys. And you're big on off season cardio, and they always look at you like you're crazy and it's very similar to around the shorter, I know you can
the same thing.
Explain it. It's very similar, like the 10-minute walks and things, but you have a couple different iterations to it, but it's very similar for stimulating digestion. And then you talk about the cardiorespiratory system not getting burned out during their strength training sets too. I don't know if you want to.
Because that's the other thing they say is then they see there's cardio, and I don't implement much cardio. I'm talking like 3 or 4 sessions a week. I usually start people out at 12 minutes, and I do like a bodybuilding HIIT. What that means is I have you work really hard for a minute and then go back down and go light for a minute. And the thinking is the hardest things you're going to do in the gym would be like a 20 rep set of squats or a 12 rep set of deadlifts. You don't do them very often, but that's about the most you do. And that's about a 1 minute set, And so I don't want your lungs to be the failure point on any of our workouts. I don't want the reason your legs aren't growing is because your lungs aren't in shape. But then the other big thing is the appetite boost. And it's, just like that's why I love reading your stuff, because, you send these people who can't gain weight and they have no appetite, and they tell you they're not going to be able to eat this much food, and they insist they can't do the cardio because they're trying to gain weight. And if you can get them to just listen, it's like a whole world opens up to them.
Agreed. And I like that you mentioned about the science behind it. Obviously, I was talking a lot about this stuff before I attached any references to any peer-reviewed research or articles or videos. But it was in the late '80s when I was studying exercise science at the University of Oregon. I learned, and we didn't have the internet back then. I was scrolling through microfiche at the science library, trying to find that one, needle in the haystack, that one thing that was going to make me take me to the next level. But I kind of had to go back to school. I got my NSCA, my CSCS from the NSCA just a few years ago, maybe 5 years ago, because I wanted to make sure that the information I was giving was solid, because I saw a lot of friends of mine, to be honest with you, influencers in the industry, gurus, who were saying some pretty stupid shit. And I've said plenty of stupid shit myself, but I certainly didn't want to live on that.
Sure.
So I recruited. That's why the Vertical Diet ebook is an evolution. It was 1.0, 2.0, 3.0. Because as I learned certain things. I refined the message or provided the nuance or directed it towards the audience to whom it was most pertinent. So about 4 years ago or a little more, I recruited or partnered with Dr. Damon McCune. PhD, RDN. He was director of dietetics at UNLV and an avid lifter. And he started training with me, and we sat down and started actually writing the book, and including now over 500 references to peer-reviewed research, and just trying to refine the message to make sure that, that I kind of stayed on, I was science-based. I wasn't just making shit up. But some of the stuff, I got to be honest with you, some of the stuff I learned long before I knew the science behind it.
Sure.
I had well over 100 blood tests. I would say it's probably north of 150 now, but throughout the 10 years there, when I came back to competing or so, I was getting blood tests on nearly a monthly basis, a month out from a show, the day after a show. I wanted to see what was happening to my body on both ends of the spectrum. When I was powerlifting over 300 pounds and I was dieting down to single-digit body fat, I wanted to see in my worst case scenario. And I learned a lot from those tests and things that I would implement. I mentioned, like with the orange juice, reducing my ALT. Just a specific example, when I would use orals before a powerlifting competition, it would zap my appetite. And I saw that very commonly in my athletes. And so I go hard at that with things like NAC and TUDCA and the orange juice, because I can't have powerlifters losing appetite and weight before a big competition, obviously. So that was one thing. Another thing was metformin. It was 15 years ago I tried it. I have this theory. It's kind of Mark Bell's, really. It's what did he say? Strength is never a weakness, and weakness is never a strength.
Yeah.
If something made me weak, the neat thing about powerlifting in particular, or bodybuilding, if you're keeping good track of your sets and reps and stuff, is it's immediate feedback. If you go to the gym and you don't perform or you aren't progressing, it's not something you did last month. It's something you did in the last 48 to 72 hours. It's a very recent thing, whether it's a short night's sleep or miss a meal or not adequately hydrated or overtraining. And so I used that as a metric, tracking my strength. And when I took metformin, it was within 2 weeks later, I had a significant decline in my strength. And then I would have athletes calling me between that and anti-estrogens. Those were the two big ones. Anytime an athlete called me and said my strength is dipped, I'd ask those two questions. Or they were home brewing their testosterone and getting massive infections without filtering it. Those are probably the top three that would happen. Antibiotics, obviously, is in that list. And even statins, the high dose statins from 5 years ago would cause a significant amount of myalgia. Now with the dual therapy with low dose statin and ezetimibe combo, we don't see that as much. But back to metformin, I learned that 15 years ago, and then I'm patient. I'm old. I've been at this for decades. I've watched the keto craze and the intermittent fasting craze, and I watched scientists and like Dr. Peter Attia, who's a brilliant, PhD, Stanford, Johns Hopkins. I watched him go through that experiment, pissing on keto sticks every day, and I just sit back and watch. And I watched a lot of these guys that were just keto zealots, and eventually discovering that they were unable to perform in the gym and gain the muscle tissue that they wanted on that, and they all started implementing carbohydrates again, every one of them.
I was just going to mention too, back in the late 90s, I was a teen bodybuilder. I did Dan Duchesne's Body Opus. I just crush myself. I remember having adults, teen, and sit down and talk to me, and they're just like, because I just look like a zombie. They're like, we're really concerned about you. What are you doing? It's
not like I haven't tried keto many times throughout my career. I worked with Dave Palumbo at one point, and a lot of respect for Dave. I like Dave. Keto is probably for fat people who a bodybuilder who's has muscle to lose, a shorter, very thick bodybuilder who also has an appetite problem. That's probably a good person to use that program with. But I'm not trying to shit on keto necessarily. Whatever diet you're able to adhere to is really the best diet in terms of weight loss. But for performance, I measured all these things, and I've watched these people, and then again, I watched Dr. David Sinclair come on the Joe Rogan show and start touting metformin as a life extension benefit. And Dr. Peter Attia said the same thing some 5 years ago. And sure enough, now Dr. Peter Attia has abandoned metformin, and we've seen human randomized controlled trials demonstrating that a 20-year trial showing that it has no life extension benefit. He still recommends it for obese diabetics, but for performance, we see that it impedes hypertrophy, it impedes cardiovascular adaptations to training. So healthy individuals should not take it. I certainly would never recommend it for an athlete. And if they're compensating by having a whole host of other PEDs in their program, great, but it doesn't provide them any health benefits. So it's just another example of things that I learned long before the science came around, simply by listening to my body and measuring my performance and looking at all the variables and saying, oh, hey, that's a problem. And I start seeing it in my clients, and I've talked about it long before, all this evidence came forth.
Yeah.
And I'm, somewhat cautiously, because I didn't want to be the naysayer, but there's things that you just learn from experience. And I think Brett Contreras just made a post to that regard. If you haven't at least, I don't want to say competed, but progressed significantly throughout a training career, and aren't, I even said in one video, if you've never been injured and recovered and gotten better than before, experience means a lot, and that would include training other people. You learn. I learned so much from clients over the years, that your quote unquote clinical practice, that even if I don't have, if I can't pinpoint the science, and I see this PhDs in nutrition taking glycine for sleep when there really isn't good evidence for it, but it's kind of individualistic, and they're hesitant to say that they do. Dr. Chris Masterjohn does, and Dr. Alan Flanagan does, but they can't find definitive research to show that in a placebo-controlled trial that it provides benefit, but they personally experience that. Whether it's placebo or not, I don't know, but that's why I'm always cautious when somebody asks me about, or when I send them a questionnaire and I ask them, what supplements do you think work for you?
Right.
And if they mention some supplement like branched chain amino acids that we have significant evidence to suggest that they don't work for performance, maybe a little bit for recovery. I don't say that that's for shit, unless it's a financial burden for them, because I don't want to start crushing people's placebos. It just doesn't make any sense. I got to be cautious about that.
Yeah, no, I was kind of thinking about what you're saying there. There's a lot of items.
I rambled on.
No.
I love this, because I see your thought, because like the thought process and how you come to these conclusions is, not that it's like a miracle that it's so similar to mine, because you have your experiences, and like, I can see you're thinking through, what have I done recently? Let me, I'm trying this, because I'm on the metformin thing. I've kind of stumbled on the same thing, and I've argued against it because it works through CAMP, which is an anti-hypertrophy pathway. And I argue, and we'll see if this pans out long term, but I argue that berberine is a better approach. Berberine can stimulate IGF-1 through a cascade reaction that to trigger the pancreas to secrete insulin and improve blood sugars. So I'm arguing that it's the similar reduction in blood glucose levels, which is the goal, but through a different pathway, and an even better pathway, IGF-1, if we're trying to build muscle. But I just love hearing the way you get on these, because I hope my clients are listening, because they'll maybe it'll provide an additional level of belief, I guess, hearing you say the same things.
Yeah. When my clients ask me things, I don't want to pretend like I'm the guru, or I'm I got the best information. I'll send them links. It's not competition to me. I'll send them video links or research. My notepad in my iPhone has hundreds of headings for about everything you could possibly imagine that people have asked me over the years, that I would then subsequently go research, or if I see someone who I deem to be qualified, PhDs in nutrition, or the exercise physiologist, if they speak on that particular topic, I'll copy and paste and put a timestamp on it with a brief summary, and then I'll forward that to people when they ask a question about that particular topic, because I want them to become informed. And here's the reason why, because especially in today's environment, there's a lot of distractions out there. And it seems like 90% of what I do is just trying to keep people focused on the big rocks. Mm-hmm. And people have this shiny object syndrome, where they see something and then next thing you know, they want to add that to their protocol. And
Yeah.
does it come at the what does it come at the sacrifice of, is my concern. Or are they not as diligent about doing the things that really work, with as much fervor or effort? And so that's kind of why I like to give them the information, because I mentioned placebo. Buying in is a huge part of the potential long-term success of a program. They really have to be committed. That was one of the reasons that I felt was so valuable about working with Flex Leader. I just turned my brain off. I had been training and competing for well over 20 years. I thought I was pretty darn knowledgeable. But I just, he told me what the plan was. We sat down and we made a plan, and I just turned my brain off and let him run it from there. And that's kind of what I do for clients now. People ask me, what do you do for a John Jones or a Henry Cejudo, or, they don't want to have to think about all this stuff, to be honest with you. Yeah. I go in and kind of make an analysis, make some suggestions, and then, we move forward, and they kind of let me handle some things so they can focus on just the training.
Yeah, and a lot of times with the high level people, I mean, they've been around the sport so long. It's not a lack of knowledge. It's a lot of times it's too much knowledge, and that you paralysis by analysis. Because when you know everything about the sport, it's hard not to think about everything. And I always say, like with dieting, there's a million ways to get in shape. The one way to guarantee you'll never get in shape is to try all million at once. So you really do need to just find someone you trust, and then and trust, and they should also, it shouldn't be just blind trust. They should be able to back, if you have questions, they should be able to explain the reason why it works, rather than just just trust me. It should be it works, here's why, and then once now believe me, and once we do it and it works, then you can trust that it works.
Or even discovering that it does work for them requires some commitment to, rather than program hopping every couple of weeks. Yeah. If you don't stick with it long enough to find out if it works for you, then you don't know whether to continue to do it or to disband, to disregard it. That's a big thing that I see a lot, is that people will ask 8 different coaches the same question and then kind of hybrid whatever's easiest.
Yeah.
I'll catch clients on the internet asking, you'll see them asking questions or making a comment, and you can tell it's like they've hired multiple coaches. Oh yeah, it's like, oh, geez, there's no chance of this working now.
And I don't mind that. I just don't want them to put multiple coaches into one block.
Well, that's what I mean. It's different if they because I work with there's a Josh Bryant, who is a guest we're going to have in a couple of weeks.
He's great.
I tend to specialize in nutrition, and a lot of my clients will go to him for training program, and we seem to work really well together. I'm talking the people who will hire me for contest prep and hire 2 other coaches for the same contest prep for the nutrition aspect.
Yeah. And then the problem with that is that nobody stays in their lane. Yeah, that's the hard part about getting into a camp with with a fighter, is 10 coaches.
I really try to say, I really try not to speak against another coach if we're working together, because he's doing something for a reason, and so even if I believe it's not correct, well, I try to stay in my lane, I guess.
Well, I guess the quandary there is it hurting their performance? And that would be the time at which you would address that with the other coach. I think this is probably actually detrimental.
Yeah.
Otherwise, a lot of the stuff that we do, like John Jones likes to do 300 ab crunches, leg scissor crossovers after every workout. And I guess the biggest reason why I hated that, other than the fact that I don't think that's a great performance tool, it was that I had to do them with him. And I hate doing.
You can't argue. What's his argument to be? It's worked for me so far, coach. You can't argue against
That's always the answer. I've always done this,
Yeah.
And
Who he's an animal, though. It is. Last
14
week,
title defenses, and I'm going to be like, nah, it doesn't work, John.
Yeah. That's like Will Ferrell. This is a dumb side step. Will Ferrell played the Unabomber on SNL. Yeah. The Unabomber, a mathematician from Harvard, and they're going to jail, and his lawyer's arguing something, and Will Ferrell's the Unabomber, tries to shush him, and the guy says, "I'm your lawyer," and he says, "Where'd you go to school?" He goes, "Penn State." He goes, well, you go watch I went to Harvard. You go watch some football and let me do the lawyering.
Yeah. Isn't that the truth? Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, I would imagine too, that's I think that's a good point for coaches out there to rest on and take that in, that, you know, the high level athletes you're working with, a lot of them, you know, I've seen, you can see it on Instagram. There's, you know, 3 or 4 coaches there at the same time, you know, you being one of them. I mean, is that something that was a challenge to navigate at first when you're working with some of these pro, you know, like MMA fighters that have, you know, a striking coach and a strength coach and all these different coaches there? Or how did you approach that when you first started?
I think it went really well. We all respect each other for our, you know, our individual expertise, and you know, and we're all there for the same reason, to help the athletes. And so we didn't see any of that, fortunately. And again, you know, my heyday's over, and I'm 55 now. I don't have to prove anything. I'm not trying to make my name off of any particular athlete. And
sure,
you know, it's interesting though, probably the social media, or just the general fight fans and stuff, that, you know, their feedback is all over the map, of course, because they have no concept as to what's going on behind the scenes. And John showed up to weigh-ins and they thought he looked fat, and so all the pundits were on the, you know, on their podcasts and talking about how he's out of shape and blah blah blah. They have no clue that you know, a six-pack means nothing for performance. And there's been plenty of heavyweights without a six-pack, and sure enough, you know, John's focus was speed, power, strength, wrestling. He came in exactly with I think all of the tools that he needed to, and obviously, and I said this too. I made a post because everybody was whining about the fact that he wasn't in the same shape at 250 that he was at 205. Like, no shit. Yeah. And John and I had this discussion 2 years ago. You know, I said, who's got the best gas tank in the heavyweight in the history of heavyweight in UFC? And he immediately said Cain Velasquez.
Yeah.
And I said, he got a six-pack? And John just looked at me, because Cain carries a lot of fat around his waist.
Yeah, oh yeah.
You know, he's never
Roy
had a
Nelson used to have a good gas tank.
Who's that?
Roy Nelson. Oh, he was
Roy Nelson.
Yeah, beer belly. I mean,
Yeah,
he was never known to fade early. Look how many muscular guys were known for fading early.
Yeah, Daniel Cormier. John beat a lot of really fit guys, but the point, I said this. I said, you know, if I had brought John in with a six-pack and he lost the fight, can you imagine all those same pundits losing their shit about how he's not a bodybuilder and he had a bodybuilder training him, and you know.
Well, that's what happened with Frank Mir. He actually got pretty muscular one fight towards the end of his career at UFC, and he looked like a bodybuilder. And I can't remember who he fought now, but he lost.
Well, I think it was the biggest mistake that Stipe made in his second fight with Ngannou, as he came in really light. And I think he was focused mostly on cardio. He wanted this is just me speculating, but I think he probably did a ton of cardio and just wanted to gas out Ngannou because he saw that he doesn't have much of a gas tank. But if you can't execute, you know, just because you're not strong enough or powerful enough, which is what obviously became the case in that fight. You know, it's all for naught how good your cardio is. And you can get great cardio and maintain a significant amount of lean mass. You don't have to have a six-pack to have great cardio. It has nothing to do with it. Mm-hmm. So you can train that without being in a calorie deficit. Historically, John would come into camp kind of late in some fights and lose a lot of weight really quickly and feel very weak. This is what he discussed with me when we were down there. And he said he would get into practice with some of the same guys he would train with, these 280, 290, 300-pound guys at Jackson Wink, and he couldn't pick them up, and he just felt so weak. And this is probably one of the biggest challenges I had when I first got in there and spoke with Jackson Wink, especially Winklejohn. I said, look, I know this is different than what you believe, and of course it's hard to say this to Winklejohn because he's one of the greatest coaches in the world, you know, both of them, Jackson. I said, I don't believe that you should, I believe that you should get in shape to fight, not fight to get in shape. And I said, and they believe just the opposite, that they come in and they get their fighters fighting, and that's how they get in shape. And the challenge with that is that if you fight to get in shape, that you have you're going to be losing a significant amount of weight, strength, decreased testosterone, increased cortisol, poor sleep, higher exposure to injury risk. All of those things occur as a result of going at it that way. And so, and the reason I discussed it with them is because I wanted, at the time I went there 2 years ago, it was supposed to be a 4-month camp. And I wanted the first 6 weeks to be getting John in shape. And they wanted him to be in the gym right away. And so we kind of agreed on having high fatigue and low fatigue days and not having him go live yet, and trying to keep the workouts shorter, under 30 minutes instead of the hour and 15 long minutes. So we were just trying to manage fatigue initially so that we didn't, lose too much strength too quick. But all of that was for naught because it was damn near 2 years before he actually fought. So he had plenty of time, and he was in great shape. Cardio is really one of his gifts.
Yeah, man, he looked dominant too, though. I mean, holy cow, he's just, it's remarkable how, and he obviously gets the praise. It's not like he's underrated or anything, but I feel like he is, because I think because I would argue that Daniel Cormier is probably the second most dominant MMA fighter in history. You could argue a ton of them, especially through the Pride years and stuff, and he manhandled Cormier pretty much,
Yeah, in the second fight in particular.
Yeah. But I just think, and to step up a weight class and be probably even more dominant than he was at light heavyweight just shows. I mean, I just thought that was like, I was, after that fight, I expected, and obviously, like, the MMA news, I follow MMA, I'm a big fan. Obviously, the news was talking about it, but I thought I was going to wake up the next morning and everything was going to be just basically saying, well, no one's ever going to touch him. He's the best. But because I thought it was, it was a short fight, obviously, but he just seems so unbelievably dominant that.
Yeah. I was nervous. I was there. I was at the fight, and I got to be honest with you, I was a little nervous. And here's the reason why. And it's kind of selfish. I told John this 2 years ago. I said, John, there's no upside in this for me. And he's like, what do you mean? How so? I said, because if you win, you always win. But if you lose, I fucked you up. So I said, there's no upside for me in this. And so I got to admit, I was a little bit nervous. I was rooting for him. And at the same time, I was hoping that I would come out unscathed.
He looked impressive.
I was going to ask you, interested in the comparison of sports. I know, Justin, just knowing you over the years and a lot of the pro bodybuilders and powerlifters you worked with hydration and, as far as keep away from cramping, things like that. Stan, when you started working with MMA fighters, was there a big difference in, sodium intake, monitoring fluids that you saw between the sports, or was it somewhat similar? I'm just curious how your approach was there with that. I know it's a big part of the vertical diet and referencing like the salt fix and different resources that you point out in there.
Yeah, the challenge with the salt fix is that Red Pen Reviews looked at many of the references and found it not to be very accurate.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of claims in there beyond the salt. I was talking very specifically when I recommend salt to large athletes who are training hard twice a day, usually in hot environments, which mostly gyms are. And of course, most of those guys are wearing, multiple layers and I'm, me here in Vegas and cramping at powerlifting meets and having clients do the same. And so, I wasn't suggesting that a sedentary, elderly, hypertensive individual should be increasing their salt. But of course that gets obviously, misconstrued and people start mentioning things like, what about hypertensive? Like, well, I'm not talking to hypertension.
Yeah, right.
I'm talking about your overweight 60-year-old father.
Yeah, and so and I was even kind of attacked by someone who I hold in very high regard, Alan Flanagan from Alinea Nutrition, for my stance on salt for athletes, and that was about 2 years ago, and then more recently, just a few months ago, they had on a PhD expert in hydration who said, well, yeah, bigger athletes should and could take in more salt without any adverse effects. And one of the other things I mentioned was orthostatic hypotension. I see a lot in women where they stand up from a seated position, like from a leg press or something, and their blood pressure doesn't change effectively, and so they get dizzy. Orthostatic hypotension. And as a trainer, I've been a trainer for 30 years. I've worked with thousands of clients. As a trainer, when you see somebody stand up and hold on to something because they're dizzy, that's a problem. And I get lots of feedback from people that they experience that. Even, my mom was the same way. Elderly people have this problem. And the solution is to add salt. That's what the doctor would tell the old lady, and that's what I would tell my client. I'm cautious how much and for whom, as far as its benefits, and as far as performance benefits. Hyperhydration. I was just watching Lane Norton talking to Dr. Peter Attia about the fact that creatine, causing more cellular volume and water in the muscle, helps with both strength and hypertrophy, because 70% of muscle is water, and there's it's not just there's definitely a benefit for that. And so it all bodes well. And when I see people talk about sodium not benefiting performance, and then I look at the comments under their YouTube videos, 60% of the people are like, worked for me. And I hate anecdotes as much as the next guy, but when it's that common, now maybe they were dehydrated, okay, and they were they're not mega dosing, and I've never suggested such.
Right.
It has been very effective. It's one of the pieces of information that I put out for which I get probably the second biggest thing that I get response or feedback from people all over the world saying, "Oh my God, this has been life-changing for me."
Yeah, no. Well, I think you can work through it from first principles, because start out, what do we know? The blood has to stay at 0.9% sodium. So if you eat more sodium, your blood sodium concentration increases. So what's the first thing that happens? You have to retain more fluid to dilute that back down. That's the old ladies. Now they're not orthostatic hypotensive anymore because they have a little more fluid volume. But your body regulates that. It's not going to just continue. Your body's going to learn that, I'm taking more sodium in. I can flush more sodium out to keep that myself at 0.9%, not just having to add more water to get me to 0.9%. And so you can work through it that way. And it solves that hypotension problem. It solves the dehydration and the low fluid volume issue. Body learns to readjust because it needs to stay at that 0.9%. So then now the body learns that to flush more sodium out. So it learns to regulate that. And then even more so, sodium acts like an androgen in the body. One of the side effects of aldactone is gynecomastia. Sodium really has almost androgenic-like effects. And so if you ever have someone on comes to you in contest prep on a low sodium diet, talking about how exhausted and how tired they are, in my experience, almost every single time to a person, increase their sodium, and they'll self-report almost immediately that they feel stronger and less tired, more energetic, and feel better on the diet.
This was many, many years ago. Essa Obiad was preparing for the Olympia. I was working with him, and I had prescribed, I guess you could say, recommended so much sodium a day. Come to find out, he comes in and poses, and he's flat, and he's trying to train, and he's exhausted, and he wears layers of clothes like a lot of these people do, thinking that sweating is going to make them leaner. He just looked terrible, and he was exhausted, and his workouts were suffering. So finally, there was a language barrier there, but finally we found out his wife had taken his sodium out of his diet because she thought she knew what was best for him. We put it back in, and his physique changed, radically within 24 hours. And then subsequently, of course, I had experienced, cramping problems. Working with Lane Johnson from the Philadelphia Eagles, Dr. Sandra Godick from the HIIT Institute, a PhD and an expert in thermal regulation and hydration. She sells a product called Levelin, a very high sodium product that she recommends to these football players based on sweat tests. So I had her send me patches, and I started giving my athletes these patches that I would send back, and they would tell me how many grams of sodium they sweat out an hour. And Lane Johnson was sweating out 5 grams of sodium an hour.
Wow.
It was ridiculous. Now we were able to bring that down, actually, and some of it was because of the apnea and the elevated blood pressure that came from operating a CPAP. So we took him from 313 pounds to 330 plus pounds and brought his blood pressure down from the 150s into the high 120s, low 130s.
Oh, wow.
And he was consuming a significant amount of sodium because you can't just take all that before a game. There's no way your stomach can handle it. So we were adding it to each meal. And then I guess lastly, I would say, as far as your specific question regarding athletes, I like to weigh them before and after training. And just like the ISSN says, give them 1.5 liters of water for every kilogram that they lose, along with about a 5 or 6% glucose solution and about 1,000 milligrams of sodium. So that would be a prescription.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. And I know we're a little bit out of time here, so we want to respect your time. So we definitely appreciate you joining us here today. But we normally do like a shoot, move, and communicate round of questions. So I won't hit you with that because it may take up a little too much of your time. But I did want to ask you just one quick thing about some of, we talk a lot about it, First Detachment, like being all in. And so I'm just curious because I was looking through some of your things. It looks like something correct me if I'm wrong, but one of your kind of passion projects is it training trainers now? It looks like you have some online ebooks or platforms for educational content for other trainers and coaches. Is that something you've been working on for some time now? And is that kind of an area of focus as you mentioned, you've been established for several years now? Are you working on passing off some of that?
I've done a lot of that. Good Life, the largest gym chain in Canada, had me flying up there and going to all their gyms and training their trainers. And the biggest thing for me was the fact that the one book I have is How to Build a Career in the Fitness Industry.
Yeah.
It's the financial portion. It's how to run a successful business so that you can train full time, because most people fail. They don't understand the marketing point. So that's a very successful book. I actually partnered with Matt Whittemer out of Beat Personal Training in Cincinnati. He does over $1 million a year in personal training revenue with about 7 trainers. And he's done that for many, many years, very consistently. And this is actual personal training, actual clients, hands-on personal training. And that's what I teach. The social media stuff, it's hit and miss. And if you don't have the following, it can be very discouraging, the online coaching stuff. Plus, it's not as personable. And I also think that the personal trainers they're on the front lines. They're the people, they've studied this against medical professionals, clinicians, registered dietitians. Personal trainers have much better long-term adherence because they're the ones that are actually engaging with the client on a regular basis. And that seems to be one of the most impactful things is can you get the client to regularly attend and be encouraged and monitored over time. So yeah, I do have that ebook for trainers. And then now I've got this Biggs University where I'm having people fly out here and actually come to my home. I'm going to cook them meals and show them how I do it. And then we're going to go to my gym and take them through some very specific training protocols. And so I kind of got that idea from Dave Palumbo's. I went to his seminar many, many years ago, the How to Become a Guru.
Nice.
And I thought it was fantastic. And so now I give people the opportunity to come do that with me.
Awesome.
Well, good stuff. Justin, do you have anything else to add?
I have a million questions. Like I said, I won't bother, but I'd love to talk to you about the business stuff, because that's really, because I moved on now. Now I'm on the business end. We own the supplement company. I have my Troponin Nutrition and then Team Troponin subscription website and some commercial properties and stuff. But I followed you from when I found out you did the construction stuff before, and I've just always been really intrigued by, because that's my biggest pet peeve with this industry, is that you get guys who are incredibly self-motivated, hardworking, able to get into contest shape. If you can get into contest shape, you can do anything, but then no one seems to let it carry over to the rest of their life. And I love the way you've done it so well, Shark Tank, all the stuff you do. So you're always hustling and always thinking from the business mindset. And because I didn't grow up with that, my dad was a pipe fitter, my mom was a nurse. I didn't even know anything about that world. And so I'm still, even though I'm kind of in it now, fascinated by it, and really look up to the people who've navigated that before me. So,
you hit the nail on the head. You said the most important thing. And I said this in a rant of mine some years ago. I said that a highly successful athlete, any athlete, particularly a bodybuilder, with the amount of discipline and consistency and time management and the scheduling and the pre-contest training, et cetera, if they committed the same amount of discipline and consistency and time management to any income producing venture, they'd be a millionaire in 5 years. There's no question.
Yep.
But I found it that they generally don't. And it's frustrating. But it's just, maybe, I don't know for what reason, but it's the same exact concept, just repeating successful behaviors over and over and over again.
Right.
I think that they're like a fish out of water and they get distracted, much as a new dieter or trainer would be, by all of the shiny objects out there, thinking that they need to pursue these fancy get-rich-quick type plans, when really you just need to knuckle down and
put the work in.
do the stuff that matters. Do the work, day in and day out. It's a little boring, to be honest with you, but it's effective. And then, the reason I was so successful with the vertical diet, I think, is I just gave away a lot of information for free.
Yep.
And people appreciate that. And then they come, if they get some value from that, then they'll come patronize your goods and services.
I think to add to that too, is very low barrier, because I remember people buying it and then sharing it with their friends, but they would still buy it. You know what I mean? Like I know, like, because Justin has a lot of ebooks, and I'm writing a few too, to where I'm sure you cringe when you hear that at first, but it actually had a different effect, to where more people wanted to support it. And then as you did the upgrades on it, the 2.0, 3.0, etc. I'm sure you saw more people getting it, because maybe like 50 guys at the gym were, hey bro, check it out, and sharing it, but they all liked it so much.
Exactly what happened.
It was more of a groundswell approach, where it really just kind of built up for you. At least that's what I experienced.
I didn't plan it that way. I didn't plan it that way. I just created a PDF and I sold it, and then people shared it, all over the place. But in retrospect, as you just mentioned, then when I came out with the vertical diet 2.0, and then the 3.0 is username and password protected. So
there you go.
As I expanded on it, but it became kind of a household name. And that would never have happened if there was a higher barrier to entry, or if it wasn't able to be shared.
Yeah. No, well, appreciate all the work you're doing with the industry. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on. And thanks again for, just all the wealth of knowledge here. Hopefully we can collaborate again in the future, and you definitely appreciate the time.
Yeah, appreciate
Thanks for having me, guys.
All right. We'll see you. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Take care.